hear that, but honestly, I've always looked at Darren Collison as a very quality NBA backup. He's had plenty of opportunities to run a team in the NBA, and he's not been successful in any of those attempts. You know, he's lost his job in Dallas to a guy like Mike James, who was, I think, 36 at the time, and the Mavericks really bounced back and had a great finish to the year without Collison starting. And I know Collison said that that was a coaching issue more than anything else, but again, it's sort of, you know, what have you done for me lately is the name of the NBA, and Collison had a good season last year as a role player off the bench for the Clippers. He played both the 1 and the 2, and he did a very good job in that role. He definitely, you know, his usage percentage went way down, and but now the Kings are expecting different things out of him, and we'll see. I don't think this roster is done, and if Darren Collison is your only point guard on the roster outside of, you know, outside of Ray McCallum, then I think that this could be a rough season. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off base, and I guess time will tell.
What do you think that the Sacramento Kings front office and the coaching staff are expecting from Darren Collison? Because you said, you know, they're going to be expecting a little bit something different from what he gave back in L.A. So now he's in Sacramento, you know, presumably the starter. What do you think the Kings are expecting him to do this season as their starting point guard?
Well, they really like his speed, and I guess I understand some of the reasons why they made the move. You know, it does come down to the fact that Isaiah Thomas was a specific type of player, and Darren Collison is a different type of player. And I don't think that Darren Collison is a true pass-first point guard, but the Kings hope that they can make him into a guy who can primarily be a passing guy. He did a lot of that his rookie season in New Orleans, and he was very successful at it. And it's something that the Kings want him to get back to. What the Kings have really preached all off season is they have this buzzword, and it's called pace. And they think that Darren Collison can turn up the pace of the game. The Kings weren't bad at pace last year. If you look at their statistics, they actually, you know, did a pretty solid job in the pace category. And that was with, you know, Isaiah Thomas at the helm. So I guess what we have to look at and see is how Darren Collison changes the dynamic of the way the offense is run and the way that the defense handles itself. They want to do a lot of full court pressure. They think that Collison can handle himself better in that situation, that he can pressure the ball from the inbounds and slow the game down on one end, and then on the other end really, you know, get out and run. And I guess we'll see. We'll see if they're right, because if they're not right, then that signing is going to be torn apart by the media, especially if Isaiah Thomas continues to flourish in the NBA and flourish with, you know, a team that basically is a conference rival. That if you're fighting for playoff spots down the road, it might actually hurt you that Isaiah Thomas is playing for the Phoenix Suns and not for the Sacramento Kings.
Okay. So now I want to move on into Summer League now. You know, the Sacramento Kings are now the Summer League champions. But what were some of the biggest takeaways that you got, not only from, you know, the entire team, but mainly the players of Ben McLemore, Nick Stauskas, and Ray McCallum? What were the biggest takeaways from those three players?
Well, I'll say this. Ben McLemore started off really, really rough. He was counted on to do a lot more during Summer League, or he was trying to show that he could do more, and what it ended up turning out to be was a lot more turnovers. I think he had something like 13 turnovers in the first 2 games. He was out of control. He was losing the ball in one-on-one situations, which he's not, at the NBA level, proven to be a solid one-on-one player yet, something that down the road he probably will be better at. I thought that, you know, Ray McCallum had a huge, huge final game, but leading up to that, he was just okay. And again, the Kings keep preaching pace, pace, pace. The fact is, Ray McCallum slows the ball down worse than anyone. He's a guy who takes forever to get across the timeline. You know, in the first 2 games, they were running it all the way down to 17, 18 seconds getting across the timeline. And once he got across the timeline, he again would take more dribbles. And that's kind of what Isaiah Thomas did last year. It's kind of the knock that the Kings had on Isaiah Thomas. So, I mean, it's something that he's going to have to change in his game. But then he shows up in that final game and was just incredible. He showed you everything that he can be. And I think what people really should look at Ray McCallum as is a guy who can play both the 1 and the 2. And I really like Ray McCallum next to Isaiah Thomas as a potential starting 2 guard, in sort of a role that we saw from Eric Snow back with the 76ers when he played alongside Allen Iverson. A strong defender, a strong passer, a guy who can go get you rebounds, who can do a lot of the dirty work alongside a high-scoring guard. But, now we're going to see him in a reserve role, probably going to see him a lot with Ben McLemore in a reserve role. Now, when you asked about Stauskas as well, I think Summer League really hurts a player like Stauskas because in his early fledgling sort of the beginning of him as an NBA player, Stauskas is going to be a guy who does a lot of catch-and-shoot 3 balls. He's going to do a little pick and roll. He can handle the ball really well, but he's not going to do a ton of that in his first season in the NBA. It's going to take a little while for him to grow into that. He's a good passer, a very good passer. He's a much, much better ball handler than anyone knew. I mean, his sort of the guy he patterned himself after as a young kid was Jason Williams, the ex-Sacramento Kings point guard. He liked to call himself White Chocolate as a kid growing up, like Jason Williams was called. So he's got crazy handles that people haven't seen yet, and he's got a lot of athleticism. We've seen a little bit of that in highlight reels. He can dunk. He can do some pretty cool things, but he's not going to do a ton of that at the pro level, especially early on. So when you look at Summer League and you look at the Kings brought Quincy Acey as their starting center at like 6'7", and they didn't run any pick and roll. They didn't run any post-ups, which, this team is going to be pick and roll and post-ups all game long, all season long. You're going to see Demarcus Cousins in the paint. That's where Stauskas is really going to excel, is in an offense with guys like Rudy Gay and Demarcus Cousins who will drive and kick or who will draw defenses in with the back-to-the-basket possession and then find shooters around the perimeter. Last year, the Kings didn't have shooters on the perimeter. They had a major, major issue with not only the fact that they didn't have any shooters, but that the shooters that they did have weren't playing well and then were all traded. So if you look at Patterson, you look at Salmons, you look at Thornton, you look at Jimmer, all of those guys were jettisoned during the season, and Stauskas is going to be counted on to pick up a lot of that slack. He's a guy who can really do a lot of things, but specifically, he's a guy that likes a little bit of room and will be a knockdown three-point shooter at the next level.
Well, you kind of brought up Quincy Acey, and for those who don't know, he got traded to the New York Knicks. The Kings have been making a little bit of small moves here and there. They picked up Deonte Burton, they picked up Simba Huller, and I believe they picked up one more person as well. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But what are your thoughts on some of these small moves that they're doing, the trade of Quincy Acey and Travis Outlaw to New York as well?
Well, they picked up Eric Moreland. That's one of the guys that they signed. And they also, while it hasn't been done yet, they actually will sign Omri Caspi. That deal is all but done. It's just a matter of there's a couple of things. Number one, he's in Israel training for the World Cup. He's going to play on the Israeli national team. In order to sign an NBA contract, to sign any contract with an American-based company, you have to actually be in America or on American soil. So there is an issue there that he is overseas, and I'm not sure that anyone wants to go to a embassy in Israel right now. It's just not exactly the safest place in the world right now. Secondly, in order to sign a free agent contract, the Kings he has to take a physical, and again, he's not on U.S. soil to take a physical. So those are sort of the reasons why we haven't seen Omri Caspi. And again, Caspi should be looked at as a small move. He's a guy that may or may not make the team, who may or may not play substantial minutes. He's a guy who passed through waivers as a minimum salary player in the NBA and was not claimed off waivers by all 30 teams. The Kings signed him after the fact. So you have to look around and say, how much can he help your team? He's going to play a little stretch 4. He's going to play a little bit of 3. He's kind of insurance in case you need to make a move, in case the Kings trade away a guy like Derek Williams. And then the rest of the guys, you talked about the AT deal. The AT deal was a straight salary dump. They were able to, AC and Travis Outlaw to the Knicks for Jeremy Tyler and Wayne Ellington. There we go. The Kings intend on waiving probably both of those guys. Specifically, Ellington is a stretch provision guy where I haven't done the research, but according to some on the internet, in fact, the Kings couldn't waive and stretch out the contract of Travis Outlaw because he was signed under the previous CBA. Ellington was signed under this CBA, so they basically can take his $2.7 million contract. And you can extend not only the financial, how you pay him out, but also the salary cap hit over, it's basically twice the length of the contract plus 1 season. So Ellington has a 1-year deal, so that means that they can stretch out his salary over 3 years. They can break up his $2.7 million contract into $900,000, $900,000, and $900,000 over the next 3 years, and they can save themselves about $1.8 million to get them further under the luxury tax for this season, which allowed them to sign Sam Boulard, allowed them to sign Eric Moreland, and not worry about the luxury tax and paying dollar for dollar over the tax. So that's, the little moves that they've done, none of them are earth-shattering. Is Sam Boulard going to make this team? Probably not. He probably will spend some time in Reno. He may get a call-up somewhere along the season because the Kings are very interested in promoting, the Indian product, their product to India. So I guess you could look at that and say, I guess you have to look at Sam and say, is he an NBA player? And the fact is, right now, even though he's 7'5" and 360 pounds, he literally is a guy who's a project, a long-term project, and he may work out, but he's probably a year or 2 away. Specifically, his body isn't ready to take the rigors of the NBA game. He can't run up and down the floor. He's sort of a big lumbering guy, a little bit like George Muresan. Doesn't have the athleticism of Aaron Gray, who was a huge man, but again, just even a lot more athletic than what we're seeing from Boulard so far. So I don't think any of these moves are like earth-shattering. I like Eric Moreland. Eric Moreland will get a shot in Reno. He will possibly get a shot on the big club. That's yet to be seen how much he'll play. They signed him to a 3-year deal, but I would be shocked if any of those years are guaranteed. He probably has a little bit of guaranteed money this first year, but then the next 2 years will be team options. And, he's a guy who showed a lot in summer league as far as his ability to rebound and to play defense, but you just don't know how it will translate. Down the road, this is a guy who might be a perfect fit next to Demarcus Cousins, a guy who's an athletic shot blocker, rebounder, who doesn't have to have the ball in his hands, who doesn't call for the ball. Any points he gets are going to be on his own, grabbing rebounds and putting them back. And just, again, Quincy Acy, great guy, very humble guy, a great guy to cover, but the Kings have so many power forwards, and so many power forwards that basically do the same thing or are limited in what they do. And it really came down to Quincy Acy or Eric Moreland, who was a better fit. And Moreland is cheaper, and he's also a better fit because they've got Jason Thompson. They've got like 5 guys that can play the power forward position, maybe even more than that. Guys like Rudy Gay or Derek Williams can slide over and play the position. Omri Caspi, Carl Landry, Jason Thompson. I mean, you got so many guys that can play that position that you can really protect Moreland, keep him on the bench, hopefully he'll start gaining confidence. You can stick him out there for 2 or 3 minutes at a time and let him just bring his energy and craziness and hope that that has an effect on the game. But if he doesn't work out, it's a low-budget move. And, again, AC would have just had a really difficult time finding any spot on this roster. And the Kings trying to do right by him. They dealt him to the Knicks, and the Knicks promised in the trade to pick up his salary for this year and actually, give him his contract, the 1-year contract that he's under. So it worked out for everybody.
All right, we have James Ham from Cowbell Kingdom on the show on the Quality Hotline. If you're looking for quality clothes at a quality price, go to the Quality Shop located in downtown Roseville, right off of Vernon Street. So, James, it's kind of getting to that mix of Team USA. They're starting to build up their 12-man roster. What are your thoughts first on Demarcus Cousins, and then also moving into Rudy Gay and how he's a latecomer and his actual chances of making the team for Team USA going into the World Cup?
Well, it's really difficult to look at both of these players and figure out how this will all work out. I think that both of them will be on the team. I think they will both make the 12. I might be wrong with that, but I think Rudy Gay is better than the other options. He's better than Chandler Parsons. He's better than Gordon Hayward, and Kyle Korver. He can do a lot for this team. He can also, those three specifically, aren't players that can go and play the power forward as well. So he brings versatility. I think he also, the other thing about Rudy Gay is that he's got 27 games international, well now 28 international games under his belt. So he's the most experienced player that they have. And I think he makes a roster, and I wouldn't even be shocked if he started a few games because he is a really good basketball player, and people seem to have forgotten that for some reason. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but again, I wrote about this not too long ago. A 51-game stretch in Toronto completely sullied Rudy Gay's image as a basketball player. People now consider him like an overpaid guy who doesn't do enough, and it's like, hey, he's not a number one option. We understand that, and he understands that. But what he is a really, really good small forward in the NBA. He's a top, 6 small forward in the NBA. If you look at it, if you look at the numbers and look at what he can do, and when you got guys like Hayward and Parsons getting max contracts, getting paid $13, $14, $15 million a year during this offseason, you have to look at Rudy Gay in sort of that same exact, mold. He is going to be a guy who, the Kings will lock up if they can, but who's going to get paid again. And I know a lot of people coming in to this offseason thought that he was like an $8 million player. Those people are crazy. Rudy Gay is a very, very good NBA player, and he's going to get a lot of money again. He's going to get $12, $13, $14 million a year in his next contract as well. But he wants to ensure that, and he's going out there and showing that he's dedicated to Team USA. He's willing to put himself out there as, again, one of the faces of Team USA. And it's a crazy risk for him because if he does get injured, it could cost him tens of millions of dollars. If he blows out a knee or, God forbid, does something like what happened to Paul George, Rudy Gay is going to get a couple of $1 million next year, and then people will see if he can prove himself, as opposed to getting a 5-year deal at $16 million or something. So, this could end up being a complete disaster for him, but it's noble. It's him stepping up and saying, hey, Team USA has lost 2 of its major leaders, and that's not to mention all the other guys who decided not to play at all. And so I thought that was a really cool thing. And, Michael Malone went to him, the ownership went to him, his own people called him and said, hey, is this something you want to do? Because it might help rebuild your image a little bit. And he's taken on the challenge. I think he makes the team. I don't think he would have come back if he wasn't going to make the team, but that's just me. And I don't think that the Sacramento Kings and that Rudy Gay himself would have called Team USA and said, hey, look, I don't care if Demarcus Cousins doesn't make the team. I want to make the team. I think that Rudy was, understood that part of this was that DeMarcus would make the team, or that he wouldn't make the team. Team USA wasn't going to take Rudy Gay and leave Demarcus Cousins off the team. At least that's how I see it. I can't imagine Rudy Gay not saying to Team USA guys, like, look, I don't want to make this team and have DeMarcus not make the team. But we'll see. It's definitely an interesting setting for Rudy to be there. Now, DeMarcus is incredible. He is by far the best post player that's on that team on the offensive end. The problem is he's not a great defender. Whether Team USA decides to keep him or not really will depend on, number one, his health. If they think his knee is fine, because the tournament's literally right around the corner. I mean, the tournament's starting, on I think the 31st of August. So if DeMarcus isn't healthy, then he's not going to be there. But also, Team USA needs to see if DeMarcus is going to be like their third big man. And I'm not if he's going to come in for Anthony Davis and Fareed and play substantial minutes. If not, there's the potential that they'll keep defensive stoppers, specific players like Plumlee or Drummond who actually sit neat over him. I think that would be a travesty. I think DeMarcus Cousins has done everything in his power to make that team. He deserves to be on that team. He's one of the best players in the world at this time, and I know that's crazy to say, but realistically, he is. And this program this summer is only going to make him better. And again, I like that him and Rudy Gay have got some more time together. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. But I expect both of those players to be on the team. I think Thursday is when we're going to hear whether or not, who is traveling to go play in Spain.
Speaking of DeMarcus Cousins, news just broke that he practiced with the Team USA today, and it's a 50% chance that he plays on Wednesday against the Dominican Republic. So there's that. So now we're going to actually move on to fan questions. If you have a question that you want to get on the show, you can email your question to sknarticles@gmail.com, or you can tweet your questions at sknarticles. The first question of the day comes from Let's Go Sack, and he asks, do you think Sim is heading to Reno for sure for at least a year or two? Sim Bahuler, yeah.
I think it's possible, but I also think that it's possible that Sim Bahuler will never play an NBA game. I mean, he's not in NBA shape. He does not have an NBA body, despite the fact that he's 7'5". I think he's got soft hands. I think he can pass, he can rebound, he can block shots. He can't run the floor, not at an NBA pace. He's going to get beat down the floor the entire time. It's possible that he goes to Reno. I wouldn't put it past the Kings to use Joel Abelson and his staff up in Reno as a way for Sim to prove himself. But, again, this guy is a major league project. He is a major league project. And I don't even I mean, there are other players that we've seen that have come, Pozenko, there are a couple other guys that are kind of like this, that are big projects. And maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't, but I think there's a good chance that he ends up in Reno, specifically because the Kings late in the season might want to pull him up and, and basically give him a shot to be the first Indian-born player to ever play. Now, I'm not saying that it's just charity and then he's not going to help the team, but, if you're a 50-win team, Sim Bahuler cannot help you this year at all. And I don't think I'm being crazy saying that. It's just that's the fact. He's not strong enough. He's not in good enough shape. He's got a long way to go. And until he gets his body in line with other NBA players, then he's not going to be an NBA player, in my opinion.
The next question comes from Jasmine Alexander. He says, "Is Eric Bledsoe an elite point guard that the Kings should go after this during free agency?"
Well, first of all, there's always these rumors that teams are looking at Bledsoe, which I don't understand at all. Because honestly, have no cap space. So you're going to have a major issue trying to get him away from the Phoenix Suns. As far as him being elite, I don't know. That Bledsoe has only started, 50-something games in his career. He's never proven to be healthy. He's played behind really good players. I thought last year he played really well in Phoenix, but
he got
it
injured.
doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like he literally isn't healthy most of the time. So I would like to see him play more before I would commit to him, just because if you're going to try to get Eric Bledsoe, it's going to be as a close to max money player, which the Phoenix Suns aren't willing to do. They're saying, we'll give you $12 million a year, but we're not going above that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, he played 43 games. Excuse me. He played 43 games last season. He's only started 78 games in a 4-year career. Those are red flags, you know. You want him to have a larger sample size. 2 years ago, before last season, his best season was 8.5 points per game with the Clippers as a backup to Chris Paul. So, show me that you can play. Show me that you're durable, that you're willing to go through the rigors of an NBA season long term, and then maybe. But that's a big gamble. I know Demarcus Cousins loves him.
Yeah.
They play together, and he loves him. But that would be a risk for the Kings, and a risk that I don't know that they can pull off because they don't have any salary cap space. So if they were going to pull off a deal like that, Phoenix would have to pay them. Would have to take on major players from the Kings in order to make any deal work, and that's not going to happen. Phoenix isn't going to take a bunch of junk in exchange for Eric Bledsoe getting paid by somebody else.
Yeah, I think the Kings gave away their biggest asset when the Phoenix Suns signed Isaiah Thomas, and then you could possibly see a sign and trade deal with maybe Isaiah Thomas, Carl Landry, and somebody else for Eric Bledsoe. But when you trade away that best asset of a player in Isaiah Thomas, or don't trade him, but basically do a sign and trade deal where he picked up his contract that they was offered to him, I mean, you don't really have a chance to go after a player like him. But like you said, and I completely agree, he's a big risk to have. I mean, he hasn't proven to be healthy both in LA and in Phoenix that first year. So
yeah, and adding to that, nobody's taking Carl Landry's salary.
Yeah.
I mean, Carl Landry has to rebuild his reputation as well, like what we talked about with Rudy Gay. Carl Landry played 18 games last year and had 2 lower leg injuries. He had a knee and he had a hip issue, and he was cut on twice. And so he's going to have to prove his value, and as of right now, he's almost like you're looking at him as like nearly $20 million in some cost over the next 3 years. And, the Kings would love to package him or Jason Thompson and go get something different just to rebalance the roster. But I don't see anybody jumping at the opportunity right now, and we're getting pretty late in the offseason.
Next question comes from Michael Ray Hall Garcia. His question is, what has been the biggest offseason addition thus far for the Kings, and who will have the biggest impact this year? I'm guessing he means out of all those offseason additions, who will have the biggest impact this year.
Yeah, I mean, Darren Collison is going to play the most, but
Yeah.
I think that Nick Stauskas has the potential to have the largest impact on this roster. What Stauskas can do is he can open up the lanes for everybody. He can make the game of basketball much easier because of his range. And, people who compare him to Jimmer Fredette are flat out crazy. Talking about a legitimate 6'6" shooting guard. He's taller than Ben McLemore. We're looking at a kid who can really open up the whole offense as a catch and shoot or a set shooter, and I think he'll have a huge impact.
Let me ask you this, James, because we're on Nick Stauskas, and I haven't asked you this question yet. Is it a competition for the starting shooting guard spot? And if so, who do you think is a better fit at that starting 2 spot? Whether it be Ben McLemore, just because he has a year under his belt, or Nick Stauskas, because as of right now, I mean, to me, he has a little bit more that he brings offensively, especially since he has that ball handling ability and the ability to play in pick and roll situations, kind of give him that edge of possibly being the starter come opening night.
Well, I think it's a competition for sure. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think that Stauskas is a better fit with this team. And I think that McLemore off the bench as a major scorer until he figures out his game is a good fit as well. I don't know. I think Stauskas could get lost in the shuffle off the bench. But then again, he might be a fireball, knockdown three-point shooter. I think that McLemore is going to be a better defender than Stauskas long term. But until McLemore gets his dribbling and his ability to catch the ball under control, I think he's a ways away from being a player that you want to count on for substantial minutes. Like if McLemore plays, more than half the game this year, if he plays more than 24 minutes, I would be surprised. And I think that he's better suited until he gets his game to the next level to play, 18 to 22 minutes a game as a guy who's coming in and bringing energy and running the floor and, maybe in certain situations being a defensive player. But we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a heated competition. We saw a little bit of that in the Summer League. But, again, what we saw was in McLemore, the competition made him he was more aggressive, but he was also turning the ball over a lot more, and the Kings can't have that.
All right, so here's our we have one more question after this. Okay, so here's the next question, and it comes via email, and there's no name on the email, so it's just the question. What are you hearing about the Rajon Rondo trade, and would you do this trade if you were Boston? Would you do Reggie Evans, Derek Williams, and Ben McLemore for Rajon Rondo?
Well, I wouldn't do that trade without a first-round pick. I think that's the one problem the Kings have. They don't have any first-round picks. So I don't know. If I'm Boston, I don't know if I feel. But then again, Rondo is a free agent at the end of the season. He's coming off ACL surgery. He didn't play back-to-back games most of the season last year. He's a little bit damaged. He's got personality quirks. You're a rebuilding team, so maybe you do it if you're Boston. I just wonder if there's not a better package out there for them, because Derek Williams hasn't shown that he's willing to be a great NBA player. He's got the tools, but he hasn't taken that next step sort of mentally to be a great player. Ben McLemore wants to be a great player, and I know that the Kings love Reggie Evans, and I don't know if they'll part with him, because there are other players they can throw in to make that deal work. But I expect, if that deal does get done, and I'm not saying that it is going to get done, it's a rumored deal that's been going on forever, right? The Kings, Jeff Petrie chased Rajon Rondo. I mean, it's like their, in Billy Dean terms, it's their, it's like their guy that they've been, their white knight, their guy that's going to come in and change everything. And I don't know. I think that they're chasing windmills. I think it's what they're doing. I don't think that they're going to be able to pry Rondo away from the Celtics. But you never know. And we'll see how it plays out. I mean, it's going to play out quickly because training camp is just around the corner, and any deal that gets done will be done probably before training camp. You're not going to switch up your roster again in the middle of training camp and then hope to work something out. So, yeah, your guess is as good as mine, Vince. I know that the Kings have chased Rondo forever. Yeah. But you brought up Isaiah Thomas as a trade piece, and I know that was something that was talked about early in the offseason, was that Boston was kicking the tires on Isaiah with the possibility of doing a sign and trade. And I think Boston would have really enjoyed having Isaiah Thomas along with Ben McLemore and maybe a first-round pick, as opposed to Derek Williams or some of the other options that the Kings can put forth.
I remember reading it somewhere, or someone telling me, and I can't remember who it was or where I read it, anything like that, but Boston, what it said was that Boston is interested in keeping Rondo, but they're also open-minded to trading Rondo, but they want to see first how Marcus Smart does on the next level once the NBA season begins. So I think that might take into effect as well, as like if Marcus Smart is something that they could start building around. Maybe Rajon Rondo is something they start looking to trade, since, like you said, he will be a free agent after this season. So there's that.
Yeah.
And the final question comes from Jessica, and there's no last name because it's email. So Jessica asks, is there a chance Rudy Gay is not a King by the end of this season and they trade him at the deadline? He does not seem like he wants to really be here since he didn't opt out and sign a new contract.
I'll say this. Anything's possible. And there's a reason why Rudy Gay didn't sign a long-term contract with the Kings before the deadline. He opted in because he's owed a tremendous amount of money. And you can't fault a guy for opting in when he's owed that much money. I mean, that's $19.3 million is not something that Rudy Gay is probably going to get again. I mean, he might get good money, but he's not going to get $19.3 million.
Right.
I don't know. If the wheels fall off this bus and it's out of control and they're clearly not going anywhere this season, I could see a way that the Kings could trade Rudy Gay, but I don't think that you should count on that, because I think the Kings they think that if they can fix Rudy Gay, it can help them rebuild. I mean, it does more than just help Rudy Gay. It also helps, the Kings in getting free agents and showing that their coaching staff is good enough to fix a player who had had some issues, who had kind of had his reputation blown apart. So, I mean, I think there's tons of potential here with Rudy Gay, but all options will be considered when it comes to this, because if you can make your team better, you have to do it. Or if you're not going anywhere and you know that, and someone's willing to give you, young pieces or draft picks or something like that, I think you have to consider it. And, the Kings have been wheelers and dealers all along, and I wouldn't doubt that they wheel and deal some more, specifically if Rudy Gay is telling them, look, I'm not coming back. So I think we'll know a lot more around the beginning of the year. If the Kings are anywhere near the playoff run, or if they're even in the conversation, then maybe we see something, then maybe we see them hold tight and start adding pieces. If they're way out of the contention, if they're falling apart yet again, then we're going to know right then that, look, everybody's available. And that's totally possible.
Yeah, for me, you kind of hit it on the head already. It's going to come down to January. I think if the Kings are again on pace for another 28-win season, Rudy Gay is going to kind of want to move on. He's already said, I want to take that wait-and-see approach with this team to see where they're going to go. But let's say they're in the conversation for possibly being an 8th, 7th seed in the West. I can see them holding tight and trying to, convince him to sign an extension, or at least wait it out until the end of the year. But I think it all just depends on what their record looks like come January more than anything else.
Well, and I mean, it does depend on Rudy Gay as well. I mean, if Rudy Gay wants to play for a winner, then he's going to have a difficult time winning here in Sacramento the next, 2 years. If he wants to play for the money, if he wants another big fat contract, then I believe that the Sacramento Kings are willing to give him another big fat contract. And I think that we'll see that relatively quick. I mean, again, if I'm Rudy Gay and the Kings have a 4-year extension on the table right now, and I'm walking into Team USA knowing that I'm going to make the roster and that I have the potential to get injured, then I take the deal. I want the long-term security in this situation. But, each player is different. Each of their motivations are different. And I think that a pairing of Demarcus Cousins and Rudy Gay for the next 4 years would be very exciting for Kings fans. And you just, at the end of it, you gotta hope that they can add the other pieces that they need right now. And they still have holes all over this roster.
All right, guys, that is our show for today. Leave your guys' comments in the comment section below, whether you agree or disagree with anything that we have said. Hit that like button to let us all know here at SacKingsNation.com, Fansided.com, and GoldenGateSports.com that you enjoyed this episode. And James, thanks for coming back on. And is there any places that the fans can find you online?
Well, sure. You can find me at Cowbell Kingdoms NBA.com, the ESPN True Hoop blog for the Sacramento Kings. You can find me on Twitter at James_Ham. And once the season starts, you can always find me on NBA.com. I write all the 10 before tip pregame stuff for NBA.com for the Kings for all home games, and also the game recaps for home games.
Awesome. And you can find me online as well. I'm at VM Center on Twitter and also on all the other social media websites. And we will be doing a giveaway next episode, which will be on Friday. Thank you to the Quality Shop down there located off of Vernon Street in downtown Roseville. Fansided.com, GoldenGateSports.com, and SacKingsNation.com for showing out the show. James for joining the show. And until next time, Kings fans, bye-bye.